Hi class, and welcome to this Year 12 VCE Economics video, part of Unit 3, Outcome 3. And this video is going to focus all about the concept of international competitiveness. What do I hope that you achieve out of this video? We're nearing the end of this outcome, and we're now going to consider how competitive Australia is. So we're going to focus on the factors that may influence Australia's competitiveness. And these are things like productivity, production costs, availability of the natural resources, exchange rates, relative inflation, and other factors. And I hope by the end of this video you understand what we mean by international competitiveness, how competitive Australia is at the moment, and we'll delve into each of these factors to consider how will they impact competitiveness internationally. So the first question then is, what do I mean by international competitiveness? Essentially, it is a measure of a country's ability to compete globally. And when I say compete, what are they competing on? The ability to sell their goods and services. This competition can be based on two factors. Of course, we are always competing on price, but countries are also competing on non-price factors such as the service or quality of these goods and services they're trying to sell. For example, Australia often really covets its reputation as a food producer and can often proclaim that they are a disease-free, clean, trustworthy source of food. It also allows them to have a bit of a price premium on our food. When I say an improvement in international competitiveness, and we're going to be focused on Australia here, essentially what we are saying is it is improved because Australian businesses have been able to produce goods and services at either a lower price or a higher quality compared to its competitors. And if they're doing that, they are improving internationally in their international competitiveness. So Australia should be always striving to be producing goods at a higher quality or improving the price at which they can produce goods of the same quality. So is Australia competitive? Now, according to the World Economic Forum, we rank 16th overall, down 2 places. Now, if you're wanting to delve into this, you're a bit of a data junkie, you like looking at this, there is a source link here, or you can search World Economic Forum Global Competitive Report 2019. And you can see Australia is 16th with a ranking score of 78.7. The highest score being Singapore and the United States, who ranked 84 and 83. What were our strengths? What are Australia's strengths that make us internationally competitive? We are very stable, and you can see 100 is the highest score you could get on each. We have a lot of skills, and we have a really good financial system. We also ranked high on health, but it was a bit negative compared to what it used to be. Healthy, we have a strong life expectancy, and there is a number of other things. What are some of the things that we don't perform well in? We performed poorly on infrastructure, the ability for us to adopt communication technology, so ITT, and we also I suspect, didn't score particularly well on innovation as well. But roughly, we are in line with the OECD average. Now, we don't need to know all this. I've found it useful, and you might want to do a bit of searching by Googling the World Economic Forum Global Competitive Report 2019. And you can see we have been jumping around, and you can see that 16th is roughly actually an improvement in what we have historically been, but we did peak at 14th in 2018. I don't believe this report was completed since 2019, largely due to COVID interruptions. So what, importantly, for us are the influences on our competitiveness? What are the things that if they go up or down will influence whether we are competitive or not? We're going to delve into productivity, production costs, the availability of natural resources, exchange rates, and relative inflation rates as 5 key factors we need to understand how they impact competitiveness. There are, of course, like many things in economics, many other factors that influence it. So what do I mean by productivity? How does it influence international competitiveness? When I talk about productivity, we are specifically talking about the efficiency or the level of outputs gained from a given quantity of inputs. So if we are given the same amount of inputs and we create more outputs, we have become more productive. Now, it probably seems pretty logical. An improvement in productivity should increase international competitiveness. Why? Because the average production costs have fallen. Because if we've made more with the same, the cost per individual output has actually gone down. Now, importantly, this international competitiveness will only improve due to productivity gains if we pass on this productivity benefit in the form of lower prices, because we've had lower production costs and we've decided to take advantage of that and lower our prices, or we've improved our quality, because remembering this is how we improve our competitiveness. Now, naturally, low productivity is going to translate into higher production costs and weaken our international competitiveness. But in short, if productivity goes up, international competitiveness should go up. And if productivity goes down, international competitiveness should go down, largely due to the impact on our production costs. Our next factor is production costs. And it might feel weird, why do we have a factor called production costs when we've just talked about it? Because production costs is not just about productivity. Production cost is all about all the costs involved in producing your goods or services. The price and competitiveness of local firms, so hence our international competitiveness, is affected by how our production costs compare with those abroad. And the major costs are things like our wages, so our labour costs, and things like super and leave entitlements and workers' compensation are things that differ around the world. And you might recognise that Australia has really high labour costs. Things like the cost of utilities, so your power, your gas and your water, as well as your communication and transport. The costs of firms of borrowing money, so what is the cost of getting capital in your business? And the cost of purchasing raw materials. Now, these costs are going to differ according to which country you're in. And some of these Australia is quite expensive in. And importantly, the relative changes are happening all the time. Now, if these costs are higher relative to overseas, it will be likely that our local firms, the Australian firms, are uncompetitive and losing their international competitiveness. Why is this? Because if our costs are high, we will have to sell our products at a high price. Therefore, we will become less attractive in foreign markets and in our market, leading hence to low exports, lower aggregate demand, and their flow and impact on employment, economic growth, and living standards. So in short, if your production costs go up, international competitiveness would likely go down. And your production costs go down, it's likely that your international competitiveness will go up. Now, some of these costs for Australia are always going to be high. We're a high cost environment, but some of these are probably going up more than other countries. I'm particularly thinking about cost of utilities. We are in June 2022 and we have a gas crisis in Australia, rising the costs of our gas at the moment significantly, hence reducing our international competitiveness. Now, the availability of natural resources is somewhere where Australia really has an advantage. The availability of natural resources essentially depends on the country's resources available. What are three really important resources required? The amount of land available for cultivation, so farming and just creating things. The natural resources beneath the ground and available for mining or utilisation, not just for mining, but all the resources available. And the climate. Now, this is where Australia really has a competitive advantage. We are rich in natural resources like coal and gas and iron ore that are wanted by other nations. We also have a large landmass, which means we have a large area of productive land for grazing, agriculture and production. Now, these factors influence international competitiveness, particularly compared to the comparative natural resources that other nations have. So this means Australia's advantage is this availability of resources. And this means that our mineral, so mining, and rural, so farming parts of our economy have a competitive advantage. We can produce things at lower and more competitive prices, increasing our international competitiveness. So in short, if you have strong or increasing natural resources, you would expect that your international competitiveness will go up because the costs of production will be down. If your availability of natural resources is going down comparatively, you would expect your international competitiveness will go down. We then come into a factor called the exchange rate. And I'm going to assume that you understand the exchange rate, but exchange rate is essentially going to influence the price of exports and imports. So a generally low exchange rate or depreciating exchange rate, as we saw actually during 2013 and 2016, allows Australian-made goods and services to be sold cheaply. So exports will become more competitive because they'll be cheaper, because they'll be able to be bought cheaper because of a low exchange rate. In reverse, a higher or appreciating Australian dollar, it will actually make us less competitiveness. So because our exports will be more expensive relative to our competitors. So in this case, if we have an appreciation, this is likely going to create international competitive reduction. And a depreciation in our currency will likely improve our international competitiveness. And that's actually why some countries choose not to float their exchange rate and keep it pegged often artificially low, something that China does a little bit. Now, relative inflation rates is, I believe, our final factor to consider. And it's a complicated one because, as I said here, lots of factors influence our inflation rate. And in 2022, we are experiencing that and seeing all the influences as our inflation rate goes to quite almost historic highs. This is why it's such an important goal. In short, though, low relative inflation should improve our international competitiveness. It helps our export sector prices because they will be lower because the costs of production aren't going to be as high. The cost of production pressures due to inflation will not be as high, so they can sell cheaper than get their competitiveness. Imports will also benefit, which increase net exports. We're going to have an increase in growth and living standards. Now, the key word here is relative inflation. What is the inflation in Australia compared to other countries? So even though we are in high inflation in Australia, if we have lower inflation than another country, our competitiveness will still be increasing even if we have high inflation ourselves. So how does this influence our domestic goals? If international competitiveness is achieved either through increased productivity or in greater resource availability, we should expect growth and low inflation. So we become better competitiveness because we have greater productivity. This should improve our growth, but shouldn't be necessarily influencing our inflation too much. Greater international competitiveness should lead to higher aggregate demand. This should increase our labour demand, reducing unemployment. And if it is achieved through structural reforms, this might actually increase structural unemployment. So in short though, and I think it's getting a little bit more too complicated in this slide, being more competitive is a great thing. It should be driving more growth, and this should improve our employment. And importantly, this should ultimately benefit our living standards. So for that, I hope you found this video useful. We're nearing the end of outcome 3, and I hope this has helped you build your understanding of international competitiveness.